morning, and thank you for joining us. In an effort to prevent an American-led peace initiative from collapsing, United States Secretary of State John Kerry will visit Amman today to meet with Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. Kerry will use the meeting to make another stab at convincing Abbas to accept the American framework for extending Israeli-Palestinian talks, which are currently slated to end in late April. And to hear more about it, we're joined in studio by Haaretz senior analyst Amir Oren. Amir, good morning to you.
Morning, Yael.
And also by Ali Waked, I-24 News senior Middle East analyst as well. Good morning to you.
Yael.
Before we break it down, let's take a look at the following report.
The moment of truth is approaching. Two big questions are hovering above Jerusalem and Ramallah. Will Israeli-Palestinian peace talks be extended, and at what price? The deadline for the current round of negotiations is the end of April. But before that, another date is looming. Next week's scheduled prisoner release. Israel has already released 78 of the 104 prisoners agreed upon as a goodwill gesture made by Jerusalem at the start of talks. But 26 remaining prisoners are waiting for next week. And here begins the mess. The Palestinians refuse to extend talks unless Israel takes certain measures, freezing West Bank settlement construction and going forward with the fourth and final prisoner release. Israelis, on the other hand, are unwilling to release the prisoners without a Palestinian commitment to extend talks. Confused? So is everyone else. 5 days before the scheduled release, the issue is at the top of the agenda. Special American envoy Martin Indyk has been engaged in feverish talks to deal with this mess. But Abbas has already begun looking for an alternative to the American route and plans to appeal to leaders at the Kuwait summit of the Arab League to reaffirm the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative as an option instead of the framework formula being developed by Kerry. In the next days, we'll find out if Kerry can make or break the process.
As we said, also we're joined by Amir Oren of Haaretz and Ali Waked of I-24 News. Amir, I want to start with you. Even Tzipi Livni, the problem with this looming deadline, I believe that even Tzipi Livni, who is the advocate of the peace process on the Israeli side, is actually recommending not to go ahead with the fourth batch of the release of the prisoners. Is this something that can even, be considered if it forgoes? Does it all fall apart?
It is indeed a sign of exasperation, because look how low we have sunk. Yeah. Rather than talking about the substance of the peace agreement, we are talking about the talks, about the extension of the deadline in order to talk on and again on the same subjects, and perhaps a few other clinchers thrown in, such as the recognition of Israel as a Jewish state, which was not even part,
never on the plate.
Of course, part of the negotiations. And there is also a domestic aspect here. You mentioned Tzipi Livni. Benjamin Netanyahu has his Likud constituency to take care of. He has an important party conference next week on the eve of the scheduled prisoner release. And therefore, what Secretary Kerry would probably ask President Abbas is to give him some time, and Abbas will ask in return for some more commitments, and Kerry will go back to Netanyahu and ask for commitments on his part. So rather than delve into the very center of this universe, we are on the periphery.
Which both sides haven't done in the 9 months that were given to this current round of peace talks.
New babies were born.
They were.
9 months.
9 months, yes.
Demography has changed.
Has changed, and including me. But Ali Waked, wondering that, when it comes to President Mahmoud Abbas, he has already said that if this peace process falters, he's going to go to his gestures. He's going to go to the UN and declare Palestinian statehood. Are we looking at all this breaking apart? I mean, because people are blaming each other that the Palestinians are going to use this as an excuse to say, okay, we're pulling out.
He will not go so quickly to the United Nations. This is one. The second thing is that Abbas will go to this meeting this afternoon with Secretary of State Kerry when he is backed up by the Arab League, who supported his refusal to recognize Israel as a Jewish state and to raise once again the Arab initiative as the base of the negotiations. The third point is for the first time in the Palestinian Authority, there is a team that is studying studying the day after, and the day after is the day after a scenario in which the Palestinian Authority will use the strongest card it believes it has in its hands, and it is the dismantling of the Palestinian Authority. I don't see the Palestinian Authority going to dismantle. There are many political...
They're actually discussing what, to dismantle the PA?
There is a study team, yes, among the Palestinian Authority that is studying the dismantling of the Palestinian Authority. Now I can tell you that the existence of the Palestinian Authority is an international demand, not only a Palestinian issue, and there are lots of even private financial interests that will prevent the Palestinian Authority to go forward in dismantling. But for the first time, people believe that they will extend the negotiations. They have no choice. The Palestinian Authority is not in a situation that it can go in a confrontation with the United States. The United States is using the same stick with which it is threatening Israel, and it is the financial boycott. Here we are going to stop financial aid from the European Union to the Palestinian Authority if the Palestinian Authority is not extending the negotiation. Now, extending is not the big issue. The question is, in the coming month, until December 2014, will it be there anything new that will bring a breakthrough? And I don't see any breakthrough. Well, the Palestinians are hearing from the Americans that some reshuffle can take place in the Israeli government. They are maybe counting on this reshuffle, but whether there is or there is not this change in the Israeli government, the gaps, the base positions of both sides are so far almost in every issue: the Jordan Valley, the borders, Jerusalem, the water. In all these issues, there were not one issue on which both sides had agreed upon.
No, exactly. It's the framework agreement that we're supposed to, that nothing moved on, Amir, and that's what we discussed at the end of your last answer. But if I'm looking at the Palestinians have a day after plan, does Israel and the Israeli Defense Forces have a day after plan? Because ultimately, if this is 20-some odd years of breaking down peace process, I don't know if anybody's afraid of a third intifada, if that's not even on the plate for the Israeli Defense Forces.
It is definitely on the plate, not as a planned move by the Palestinian Authority or its security forces, which are American trained and to some extent controlled. But the calendar is artificial. The deadline is artificial on the calendar. However, the problems are real. And in 1988, King Hussein, who was then the interlocutor on the Arab side, disengaged from the West Bank and told Israel, in effect, if you like the Palestinians so much, please go ahead, get stuck with them, negotiate with them. Now, what Abbas could do, and I'm following Ali's report right now, he could tell Israel, you like Hamas so much, fine, I'm leaving, I'm going to the Gulf, you stay with Hania and the others, and those groups in the West Bank, which are certain to rise and take arms, and perhaps after you have, whether it's the third intifada or just another confrontation, perhaps then you will sit down with me seriously. So yes, there is this serious prospect of Palestinian institutions being dismantled, even if the PA itself, as a framework, will stay in place, but there will be a vacuum.
There will be a vacuum. So finally, obviously time will tell, but as we said, Kerry meeting with Abbas today. Ali, walk it real quick. What do you think will come out of this meeting? On theory.
Well, on theory, the Palestinian Authority will approve the continuation of the negotiations, but we should pay attention to the point of the prisoners. It's not only symbolic, it's not only a gesture of goodwill. The Palestinian Authority say that they understood from Secretary of State Kerry that all prisoners arrested before the Oslo Agreement will be released in these negotiations. Now, if we are talking about 26, there are no West Bank and Gaza Strip prisoners who are 26 before Oslo Agreement arrested right now. It means that there are some Arab Israelis, some Palestinian citizens of Israel that President Abbas wants them to be out of jail, and this is an issue, and this issue is also related to the fact that recognition of the Israeli state, of the Jewish state of Israel. When President Abbas is demanding the release of Israeli citizens, what is exactly what is the Israeli position? Because it will definitely hurt the Israeli demand to be recognized as a Jewish state, and it will allow President Abbas. But if President Abbas will tell the American that he is demanding guarantees that by December there will be a serious framework. Nobody is talking about a permanent agreement. A serious framework, very well scheduled. I see that many factions, even within the PLO, will not accept continuing the negotiations.
My guess, there will be a prisoner release, not the prisoner release. Most of those, except for the Arab Israelis, will be released. There will be some extension, but by the late April or early May timeframe, we will have to see what happens with the final prisoner release batch.
The batch. Okay, fascinating stuff. Thank you guys for joining me in this one. Still with our analysts in studio, on to our next topic. Arab leaders convened in Kuwait yesterday for the annual Arab League summit amid disputes over the Syrian war, Sunni and Shiite regional influences, in Egypt's military government. 22-member Arab League countries also heard an appeal from the United Nations peace mediator for Syria, Lakhdar Brahimi, asking them to end the flow of arms to the combatants in the war which killed over 140,000 people thus far. To hear more about it, as we said, Ali Waqid's still in studio, so is Amir Oren, but before anything else, let's take a look at the following report about the summit.
Thousands of miles away from the G8 in The Hague, another significant conference is taking place. Kuwait opened the annual Arab League summit Tuesday with high tension and divisions between the participant countries.
Our summit is taking place at a time when enormous dangers are taking place in the world and in our region for what it represents from an accumulation of challenges and dangers that we are confronting.
The main topic of the session is the ongoing crisis in Syria that recently entered its fourth year. While Syria's membership in the League was suspended in 2011, Syrian opposition members are taking its place. But even within members of the opposition, there seems to be a little common ground regarding the future of Syria.
Any election which Bashar al-Assad running for would be illegitimate. It is a game played in a country where there is a military conflict, where half of its residents are refugees or displaced.
The Syrian delegation's empty seat sends a clear signal to al-Assad, who will translate this as kill and your seat awaits you after you complete your war. This is the way the regime understands the message it is getting from the Arab world.
Another center of controversy here is the Egyptian policy towards the Muslim Brotherhood. Over the last few weeks, Egypt increased its activities against the Brotherhood, including giving death sentences to 529 Brotherhood supporters. The differences between the countries escalated recently as Egypt, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia recalled their ambassadors from Qatar who supports the Muslim Brotherhood. Members of the 22 Arab countries at the summit insist on presenting unity and collaboration, but underneath the surface the tempers are high in Kuwait City and the summit has just begun.
Ali Waqid, the Arab summit in Kuwait, I think the headline out of it was actually Lakhdar Brahimi begging Arab countries not to keep supplying guns to the Syrian conflict. Is anybody listening to him there?
No. The answer is no.
No, that's depressing.
And when the world is talking about the new Cold War between Russia and the United States, or Russia and the West, we should pay attention in this context to the small Cold War between Saudi Arabia and between Qatar, between the Council of the Cooperation in the Gulf, which was like a base of stability in this very unstable Arab world, is now in a huge division between Qatar on one hand and supported somehow by Oman, and on the other hand, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Bahrain. And those two sides who agreed upon chasing Assad and replacing it by the opposition are supporting rival groups in the opposition. In Syria, there is this big war between the opposition and between the regime, but there is these atrocities committed as part of the entire fight between different opposition groups, some supported by Qatar, others supported by Saudi Arabia. They won't agree on the seat of Syria. They won't agree on supporting or not supporting the new regime in Egypt. And now we see that the Palestinian file is back and down in the list of priorities of the Arab world. We should pay attention. This Arab summit bring the Arab world when in all the 22 countries there is instability, and some of this instability is feeded by the policy of other Arab countries.
Right.
Yeah, and we are talking about Syria, but this is Lebanon also. This is Iraq. This is Yemen,
This is
and
Egypt.
almost Egypt, and
It's all
almost
around.
everywhere.
But sadly, all the time we have. Thank you for joining us, Ali Waqid, Amir Orant.
One word.
With
One
one
word.
second.
20 years ago, in the heyday of the Oslo process, Shimon Peres suggested that Israel join the Arab League. One shudders at the thought of what would have happened had Israel been there too.
Completely. Thank you so much for joining us. And when we get back, an exclusive interview with Ron Jones. First, the news, though. Good morning. Thank you for joining us. I-24 News Morning Edition, where you should be because, yes, indeed, this is where we say hello and good morning to my one and only Anthony Grant, who joins us daily to discuss the news you missed while scanning the headlines.
Hello.
Don't blush. Yeah.
Is it showing?
Yes, yes.
Well, I was kind of blushing when I saw this headline yesterday about Israel and Turkey possibly signing a reconciliation deal in April, because who knew, on again, off again relations with Turkey and Israel.
Since the ship
the Mavi Marmara 2010 incident. And so we'll see if we'll see if the deal actually is finally inked. But it looks like, according to Deputy Prime Minister in Turkey, that it's looking like it's going to go ahead finally, sort of finalizing the details on that. So the Israeli press, of course, and Turkish press is following this very closely.
Bringing this up, and that would be actually a culmination of, as you said, 3 years of very much frozen relations.
Very contentious, to say the least, relations.
And maybe that's something Erdogan needs right now.
It probably couldn't hurt.
Yeah.
So
I
that's
don't think they're going
to
to announce it on Twitter, but still.
I don't think so. Yeah, not Twitter.
No.
Back to Putin in a sense. Financial Times has a headline that's quite compelling. In new Cold War, Russia can hit America where it hurts on Iran. So this is an article that's saying that despite the fact that American and Russian officials were working side by side in Vienna last week on the nuclear negotiations vis-a-vis Iran, that basically the Ukraine crisis could potentially seep into Russian policy toward the Middle East.
That's the million-dollar question. I'm glad you brought this headline to our attention, because it is the next, the next time these two powers meet and have to resolve something is on the Iran issue. And just judging from how, sanctions are thrown back and forth between Russia and the United States, and Putin fairly doing, exactly what he wants, then yes, we'll see how that sifts in.
So that's interesting to see, as well as what's happening in the corridors of power in Washington, D.C. The Washington Post reports that billionaire mogul Sheldon Adelson, friend of Israel, has been looking for a mainstream Republican who can win in 2016. This is, it's starting up. It's starting up.
Yes.
This very week, guess who's going to be meeting at his posh hotel, the Venetian in Las Vegas? There's going to be a sort of a coven, if you will.
I shudder to ask.
New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker.
Christie's still in the mix?
And Florida Governor, Jeb Bush.
Jeb was actually somebody I thought would run, about, last time around, or was going to come back into the mix.
He might be coming back into the mix. And the article is saying that the Sheldon and his wife Miriam basically wasted $92 million trying to push Newt Gingrich in the last election cycle. And now they're looking for someone who can be more mainstream, more likable.
Because they have an extra $92 million.
They have more than that, I'm sure.
Yes. Okay. Interesting to watch.
More on the cultural note, Gulf News reports that Iraqi talent is shining in a singing contest. It's the Arabic version of The Voice. And there's two young Iraqi guys, Sattar Saad and Seymour Jalal, who are 2 out of the 4 final contestants tipped to win. So yesterday we talked about how some Iraqi trains are high tech coming into service. It's a little symbol that things in Iraq on some level could be, on the bright side.
And hopefully infrastructure. I think that's very optimistic. I think Iraq is a story that nobody covers enough anymore because it's such a terribly torn country with the civil war raging. So it's nice to see something optimistic.
And there's a very proud singing culture in Iraq that is very not very well known outside of the region, but it's definitely coming back into the spotlight.
No, more power to them. I wish we could have them on here.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Also, absolutely. On a cultural note as well. This headline, young Syrian refugees bring King Lear to life in the desert. Did you see this one?
That's amazing.
Yeah, the Zatari refugee camp in Jordan. There's about 100 Syrian refugee children there that have been participating in a show of King Lear, Shakespeare's great tragedy, organized by a Syrian actor in exile who fled from Assad. And it points out that, there's some 500,000 Syrian refugees in Jordan. In this camp, there's about 100,000. Half of them are children. And something like this shows that, there's some optimism on some crazy level.
Optimism. I think that there's something so,
This could be a movie at some point.
No,
I think,
it is going to be a movie.
I think
staging Shakespeare in a refugee camp.
In the Jordan desert.
In the Jordan desert, Syrian refugees, children that probably, will not have a chance to go back home. Who knows where they're heading in the next several years as that war is going so badly.
Yeah.
But my God, fascinating.
Yeah, it's a very touching thing. I mean, even, it would be amazing, I think, to see that performance, because according to the article, it's, it's a full-on Shakespearean experience. And King Lear is heavy stuff.
King Lear's heavy. It's heavy. And I understand the choice of King Lear.
It's setting appropriate, I think.
Out of the Shakespearean body of work.
Yeah.
King Lear, when it comes to seeing what's going on there and regime and
if they were doing Midsummer Night's Dream, that would be something else. No, maybe in another universe.
As You Like It probably was not on the agenda.
Yeah, not right now.
Okay.
And this interesting article from the Desert Sun, which is a paper out in the Palm Springs area of California, talks about the base called 29 Palms, which is a huge marine base, where apparently there have been more fatalities on sort of this highway that leads out of the base in the past few years than there have been in the Middle East with deployments.
You're kidding.
Not kidding. And it's
Actually, it's number. My God. Okay. Anything done about that?
Well, they're looking into. Part of the reason that is that it's one of the most isolated marine bases in the United States. There's the closest nearby town is about an hour's drive, maybe a little bit less, which is actually Palm Springs.
And it killed more people than soldiers that were deployed.
Since 2007, 60 service members from the base died in war zones in the Middle East, but 64 died on American soil along this highway.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, alcohol can be an issue, fatigue, it's dark. I mean, we're talking the middle of the Mojave Desert.
It's that staggering, actually it's that surprising number. I don't know if, in Israel, people have, they're such horrible drivers.
This is true.
No, they're horrible drivers that there's actually, I think I'm right in saying the statistic is that more people died on the roads in Israel than they died in wars, and there have been a lot of wars.
This is, yeah.
Yeah, so my God, okay.
Yeah, it's in every loss, it's like, it is, of course, a tragedy unto itself. So I think that they're studying ways to, relieve the boredom of the troops or other things too.
The solution's not going to be deploy them more, but yes.
Right, yeah, hopefully
there we
not.
go.
Moving on to the Express and Prince Harry. Prince Harry of the United Kingdom has whisked his girlfriend Cressida Bonas away to Kazakhstan for a private skiing holiday.
In Kazakhstan?
In Kazakhstan, yeah. Who knew, right?
I was about to say, yeah.
The two met on a ski holiday in Switzerland, so they have a
where?
thing for
in
slopes.
Kabul? Okay.
They arrived by private helicopter to a chalet.
To Kazakhstan.
Near Alma-Ata.
Wow.
The exclusive resort of Shimbulak. Yeah, I'm not making this up. I am not making this up.
No, you're not making it up. Once again,
what this
in
points
Klingon.
to, this points to the fact that maybe their relationship is ratcheting up a level.
Whenever I was serious with somebody, I went to Kazakhstan.
It's a nice place to lose someone, you know.
It would be Kazakhstan.
Yeah.
Wow, Tony.
Yeah.
That's clearly the news of the day, Prince Harry and his loved one
Rocking
in Kazakhstan.
them in Britain, yeah.
Rocking them that way. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
joining me this hour. On to our next topic, and a very important one. In 1967, Ron Jones, a high school teacher from Palo Alto, created a week-long project for his sophomore history class that was studying Nazi Germany. The experiment was designed to explore the question of how was it that the people of Germany could allow the rise of fascism and National Socialism and claim ignorance of the atrocities that were committed by them to neighbors and friends. Jones called the classroom experiment the third wave. It was only a classroom experiment, and it lasted only 5 days, but it went so far it ended up costing him his job and future as a high school teacher. We are very, very, very proud to be joined in studio by Ron Jones. Thank you
My
for
pleasure.
being with us. And before we delve into the story and actually see what happened after, let's take a look at the following report.
How can one teach about the rise of totalitarian societies? In 1967, Ron Jones came up with the third wave, an experiment which aimed to prove his students in California that no one is immune to the lure of fascism.
Begins with posture.
Over 5 days, Jones introduced them to strict disciplinary routines, including a mandatory gesture which resembled the Nazi salute. Remarkably, Jones's students all followed his instructions, and others soon joined in. The third wave swept the school as students felt superior to those outside the classroom, and violent outbursts occurred. Jones went on to promise an anticipated address by the movement's future presidential candidate. Only then did he explain to the students that they were part of an experiment and are now able to comprehend the risks entailed in peer pressure, charisma, and authority. In 1981, Jones's experiment was adapted as The Wave, a successful novel by Todd Strasser. Various film adaptations have been produced worldwide. Currently, the Israeli Orna Porat Theater for Children and Youth is staging a play based on The Wave. Hopefully, it will strike a chord with the local children, as it did everywhere else.
And we are very proud to be joined in studio by Ron Jones himself.
Good morning.
Good morning. Who, as we said in the report you're here in Israel with the Orna Porat Theater, I grew up on the stories of your experiment. I remember reading about it. I remember watching the film, and I'm trying to think, because this was in the 60s, right? Essentially,
Yes.
This was in the late 60s, and you come up with this idea, which is monumental. In the 5 days that the experiment was carried out, you essentially made those kids give up their personal freedom. No?
Yes.
How did you do that?
We initiated initially by having the students sit at attention, be at attention, feel the idea and the power of discipline. And I thought that would be enough to understand what it might be like to be in a totalitarian state. But when I returned to class the second day, the students were sitting with these zipper-like smiles and beckoning to go on. I think they just wanted to get me talking as opposed to giving the test. But I went to the blackboard and spontaneously wrote strength through community. La Raza, a movement, a cause, what it feels like to be a part of something bigger than oneself, to help each other, to have armbands perhaps, or to have membership cards, to have this sense that we're doing something, not just with a simple answer, but we're going to change something because the school was in chaos. There was integration and there was a war. So then it just sped out of control into 5 days.
But 5 days is a short amount of time, and I think what's so fascinating about this experiment is the willingness. It started from, and you said something very interesting right now, from an attempt to make you, sort of appeal to you as a teacher, right? The second day when you came in and everybody was doing the same thing.
Right, I got trapped by my own curiosity, and I became a victim of my own experiment because I liked it. I liked the order, the discipline, the adulation.
And you, 5 days into it, And fascinating at that point as well, that you liked it, which I'm assuming every fascist leader can say,
Yes.
you know, in many
And
ways.
you become very paranoid, which is a thing I didn't anticipate. You become very fearful that something's going to get out of control. Or I had a bomber in the class, a kid that had blown off his hand, and he was making bombs, and I knew that. I didn't know where that might manifest itself.
Right.
So there's great fear in the system.
And out of the whole class, you said that I believe there were just 2 kids or 2 girls that...
Girls.
Girls. Okay, tell me about that. That did not go along.
2 women in the class stood up. One came to school in the evenings and plastered signs on the ceiling saying, "Stop the wave." Another student, Alicia Hess, who now is a musician in New York City, stood up in the middle when everyone was rushing to the rally and said, "Don't go." But the students simply rushed right past her. And there's a third woman you've not mentioned. That's my wife. My wife recognized that she didn't like who I was becoming. I'd lost my playfulness. I've lost my kindness. I was absorbed. I was obsessed.
Did she know you were doing an experiment, or did you?
Oh, yeah. She was a fellow teacher, so
Right.
she was the one that cautionary said, "You have to stop this." And fortunately, my wife and I have been together 54 years, so you listen to some companion that you love, and
You'd like
did
to
stop it.
think, yeah.
Well, but think
Well, you were
about that it
obedient
was
to
women.
her.
That it was women who did recognize what was going on.
And fascinating. How did you then, pardon me, how did you stop it? What happened the moment you tried to stop it?
I created a huge rally like in Nuremberg. I lied to the students to start with, saying that there's going to be a national leader. You're going to meet, and we're going to take over this city, this world. Come to the rally, and the students assembled for this huge rally in uniforms and the whole,
Right.
and then the image that I presented was the leader is Hitler, and the Holocaust is what's going to happen. We're no better or worse than the Germans we've been studying. We're just like them.
You basically said to them, that is your leader.
And
Yeah.
one more thing. If history is true, we'll leave this room and never admit to being here. We'll be just like the Germans, in denial.
Yeah. Is that what
And
happened?
that's what
also?
happened. The wave did not become public knowledge until 10 years after
Why?
the fact. Because we were ashamed. There was betrayal. There was sadness in our souls. We knew something evil about us that is not comfortable to know.
I mean, do you truly believe that it is human nature?
It's part of human nature. I think we can be good and evil easily. And we give up our freedom for the thought of being superior to others, without a doubt.
And did it help, do you think? I mean, in understanding the Nazis, does it help to understand the Holocaust, or does
I think
it actually
helps to
do the
understand
service?
myself. It helps to understand ourselves. You know, they often portray Hitler as the problem. That's when the Germans did this as the film Die Welle. The ending of the film is this man staring ahead, and it's the leader that's the problem. The leader's not the problem. It's the people. Can we stand up? Do we stand up? When do we stand up to injustice, to things that aren't fair? How do you have the courage to do that? If there's a child in your room that's always alone, can you walk across that room and introduce yourself to that person so they're never alone?
They're never alone. Ron Jones, it's such an honor and a pleasure to have you in the studio. Thank you so much
My
for
pleasure.
joining us this morning and for being in Israel. When we get back, something different, 35 years after the Camp David Accords, we'll take a closer look at what really happened behind those closed doors when Egypt and Israel signed the historic peace treaty. Before anything else, let's hear some more of the morning headlines. Welcome back. It is still Wednesday, March 26, 2014. This is still the morning edition. I am still Yael Levi, and you're still with us where you should be, because this hour of the show is a special one. We dedicate the second hour of our show today to the 35th anniversary of the Camp David Accords, when Israel and Egypt signed the historic peace agreement. It was and is an agreement of tremendous strategic value that, as many will argue against all odds, still holds to this day, 35 years on. Above all, it changed the Middle East forever. Three very courageous men, Egyptian President Anwar al-Sadat, Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, and U.S. President Jimmy Carter, at the time brought about this agreement. As they, sadly, cannot join us today, we are honored to be joined in studio by two of the main characters from that time, Israeli Prime Minister Begin's Cabinet Secretary, Professor Aryeh Naor. Professor Naor, good morning to you.
Good morning to you.
And by Channel 1's head of the Middle Eastern desk, who reported live from that historic event, Oded Ganot. Oded, thank you for being with us. And before we take a look at what happened behind those closed doors of the negotiations 35 years ago, let's take a look at how it all came about.
The casual walks between peace talks at Camp David showed how far Egypt and Israel have come by the late 1970s. In 1973, Israel marched to the beat of a different drum when it staged what proved to be the nation's last military parade, a devious tradition established shortly after 1967. Israel's military victory that June saw it defeat Egypt, which posed the greatest security threat to Israel, while backed up by Syrian and Jordanian forces. The fighting in the Sinai Desert in particular, between Egyptian and Israeli soldiers, soon became an iconic moment for many Israelis who felt invincible. Yet Egypt had other plans and sparked the Yom Kippur War in October 1973 by launching a surprising offensive maneuver. Nearly 200 Israeli soldiers were killed on a daily basis during the first battles. An ongoing debate in Israel commenced whether this war could have been prevented and how much was Sadat serious in his pleas to end the conflict. The Camp David Treaty finally pushed those fears aside. More so, for a brief period, many hoped other Arab nations would now follow Egypt's lead in diplomacy as they did in battle.
We're very honored to be joined in studio by former Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin's Cabinet Secretary, Professor Aryeh Naor. Professor Naor, first of all, as we said, as Oded Granot corrected me, very important to say, this was the actual signing. This is this is when it all comes about. Today is the date. Many will argue that, Menachem Begin was the only one who could bring this peace accord about. Others will argue that actually this peace accords was a culmination and a victory of the Yom Kippur War for the Egyptians. That this is something that Anwar Sadat wanted even before the 72 war, tried to approach the Israeli government, nobody listened to him, and then it was Menachem Begin that sort of reaped the fruits of that. Is that correct?
Well, I don't want to start arguing with Sadat and his followers about his intentions before the Yom Kippur War. It seems to me that he was not ready for a real peace with Israel, with normalization, the exchange of diplomatic relations, etc., something that he was ready for only after they lost the 73 war. But I don't want to start with this because we won't finish.
Okay.
Concerning Menachem Begin, I think you are quite correct because being the unchallenged leader of the Israeli right, he could bring about what leaders of the left wing could not.
Could not do. Was this something that was, you were close to him, you were the Secretary of the Cabinet. What, behind, but as this all started, what was his feeling towards bringing this about? How much was he passionate about trying to bring such a monumental peace?
He was very much passionate about it. On the evening of his electoral victory, May 17th, 1977, he declared victory, thanked his wife and his followers and his ideological mentor Jabotinsky, etc., and then he turned to international politics, and he said that he was inviting President Sadat of Egypt, President Assad of Syria, President Assad the father, President Sarkis of Lebanon, and King Hussein of Jordan to negotiate peace with Israel. and he was ready for any kind of procedure of the negotiations. Then, when he formed his cabinet, he went to his first state visit to Washington with President Carter, and in a very different way from what all his predecessors did. He said that he was ready for any procedure. It could be the resuming of the Geneva Peace Conference. It could be direct negotiations with Egypt and Syria and Jordan, or in Jerusalem, or in their capitals, or in Washington, or in Geneva, or elsewhere, wherever they wish, with all of them together, with each of them separately. Then he continued, and he said to Carter that he was ready for a substantial withdrawal in the Sinai and a certain withdrawal on the Golan Heights. That was the beginning.
At the beginning
of the beginning, in July 77.
What were the reactions in the cabinet? Did they know he was going to do that, the Israelis?
Yes, before going to Carter, he chaired a cabinet meeting and revealed to them his plan, and they discussed it, and in the end they agreed.
And the fascinating thing about this, although it does seem to happen in most Middle Eastern peace processes when they do succeed, is that you in the press, and you were a young reporter of the mere age of 10, so it seems, but you were a young reporter. 8 years old. But you were a young reporter. You and the Israeli press corps, you had no idea this was coming, did you?
This is correct. I mean, I was on a U.S. tour organized by the State Department and asked by my editor in Maariv. I was a young reporter to help out our permanent correspondent in Washington who covered Camp David. And as you remember, as everybody remember, there were 2 weeks of total blackout. We knew nothing about what's going on up on the hill. We were down at the press center at Thurmont, but we had to fill up every day 3 to 4 pages. You know, it was Maariv at that time. Our permanent correspondent went to do an interview with a tree. And I went to do an interview with the mayor of Thurmont, where the press center was located, and he showed no interest in what's going up on the hill. This is not surprising. But one episode, I mean, we had a source in the Israeli delegation up on the hill who gave us nothing.
It wasn't the professor, was it? Okay.
No,
you weren't there.
I can't reveal his name even now.
Even now, okay.
But he gave us nothing on substance, but he gave us what we call in the press, the media, the color stories. And the American media went crazy. Where do you get all these stories? Because once a day, Larry Speaks, the White House spokesman, would come out and say, I have nothing to tell you. So we had the stories. We didn't know. And I won't argue with Aryeh about Begin's intention. Of course, he had the desire to have a peace, but Aryeh correctly said that Begin never dreamed of giving back all Sinai, nor giving autonomy for the Palestinian, which was included in the final agreement.
He never dreamed.
You are wrong. You're on one point.
Giving back all Sinai at the beginning?
Not at the beginning. Well, he negotiated. He started with a substantial withdrawal in the Sinai. Concerning the Palestinians, it was Begin's idea to grant them autonomy because he took it from Jabotinsky, who took it from the Austrian Marxists, Karl Springer, in the beginning of the 20th century. This was the preferred solution for a situation where there is more than one nation in a nation state.
But he said autonomy for the inhabitants, not
for
for the territory.
Not for the territory.
And he insisted on simply completely different from what Carter envisioned or Sadat.
Yes, but it was written in the Camp David courts that this is an autonomy for the Palestinian Arabs residing in the West Bank in English or in Hebrew, Judea and Samaria.
Eventually, both agreed, Sadat and Begin, to delay the Palestinian issue.
There was sadly, as it's been an agreement for to this day. But speaking of the Sinai, and fascinating that you raised this, because I had an opportunity to sit with William Quandt a few months ago, who was part of the negotiations. He said that Sadat went into the negotiations saying that he will not accept any type of just half a withdrawal from the Sinai, substantial.
The last inch.
To the last inch. He's going to get it all back. And, is that...
That's correct. That's correct. And indeed, when Moshe Dayan met with Sadat after Sadat's visit to Jerusalem and gave him the first initials of the Israeli peace plan, he said that we were ready to withdraw from the Sinai. As a matter of fact, when Begin and Sadat met at Camp David Hotel in Jerusalem, on the evening when Sadat came, Begin said that there must be a demilitarization of the Sinai. Sadat's answer was, yes, but on a reciprocal basis. Then Begin said, if it will be reciprocal, we shall have to demilitarize all our Negev. And I'm not sure that Sadat caught at the instance that he could take from Begin all of the Sinai. Because if you look at the map, this is what he said.
They're basically only for... Okay, interesting. And again, time is up, but at the end of the day, the whole of the Sinai was returned. Speaking of the negotiations, as you said, and the meetings in Jerusalem, Bill Quandt, and I'm going to start with that. Actually, I'm going to start with you, Oded Granot. William Quandt, who was part of the American team on the negotiating side, said the two sides really didn't like each other. He said that Sadat was very,
They never met for the first 10 days. They never met, Sadat and Begin. It was only Carter who shuttled between the two, and eventually, I think the Carter role was instrumental in bringing both sides to an agreement.
Yes.
He pushed, he threatened, he bribed both sides. Was a very large package of aid. Without Carter, nothing would come out of Camp David.
And there is another person without whom nothing would come out, and this is Aaron Barak. Aaron Barak, who
remind us who he was at the time?
Who was the only one who could find the formalization, the formulas on which both sides could agree.
And if we should mention another name here, is Ezer Weizmann. Ezer Weizmann was the one who broke the ice, was the first one to break the ice with Sadat, even on Camp David.
So?
Yes, because it was so nice.
His attitude is friendly. Sadat liked him at the first moment. And they became, I won't say friends up on the hill, but one of the color story we got from our source there in the delegation is Ezer Weizmann riding Sadat on this golf car. This something. This was at the time when Begin refused to meet Sadat
and vice versa.
Vice versa.
Yes. And the little golf carts in the Camp Davies are actually visions that I remember, but it wasn't really much of a vacation, right? This was, tough negotiations that went on for months.
Begin called it a deluxe concentration camp.
Which one would argue?
On the 11th day, both threatened to leave. So that was about to leave Camp David, and so was Begin.
And then what happened?
Carter went in and say, well, if you leave, then he didn't threat to cut the aid to Israel, as far as I remember, but he made other threats that made Begin and Sadat stay and eventually sign the peace.
Right. And Professor, just quickly to you, why do you think this peace is the one that's lasting in this region for so many years?
Because it is in the interests of both countries. Egypt doesn't have any interest in being in a state of belligerency with Israel. It cost them so much in human lives and destroyed their economy.
And vice versa also, one can argue.
Not that much. On the other hand, Israel has a real interest in keeping peace with Egypt. We don't have anything to argue with them about, except for abstract things. like ideology, you know. But there is no.
I agree with Arya. It was a piece of cake. Consider the case with the Palestinian. Yes. There were borders defined. There was no territorial dispute.
Sovereign country versus,
two sovereign countries
versus an autonomous. Thank you both so much for joining me. And before we get into the next news block, let's hear some of what Nabil Fahmy, the current Foreign Affairs Minister of Egypt, had to say about Israel and Egypt and their peace agreement, and when we spoke to him recently.
It was never a question, for me at least, that we could sign a peace agreement with Israel. It made sense for Israel. The minute we signed the peace agreement, they were not going to be threatened by a full-fledged Arab-Israeli war. War is off the table if Egypt's out of the equation. And the Israelis knew that, and as much as they play the victim in this, they understand their interests very, very well, and they're very smart negotiators. So for me, that they would sign an agreement with Egypt was obvious.
That's the Egyptian side, but all will agree a 35-year-long peace that has been lasting and the most important one in the region. Thank you to both of you for being with me. First, let's go back to the news. Good morning, and thank you for staying with us. A very special day. We are marking the 35th anniversary of the Israeli-Egyptian peace accord that was signed today, 35 years ago. That's an agreement that has lasted 3.5 decades, but not without criticism, as it is often described as a cold peace, with many in Egypt skeptical about its effectiveness. Furthermore, the Arab Spring that is still in transformation in Egypt has concerned Israelis as to its effects on the treaty. And to hear more about the accord that was signed and the ever-changing environment of the Middle East and the Egyptian-Israeli reaction to it, we are very honored to be joined in studio by former Israeli ambassador to Egypt, Ambassador Yitzhak Levanon. Good morning to you.
Hello, good morning.
And of course, by I-24 News senior Middle East analyst Ali Waked. Ali, good morning to you. And before we break this one down, let's take a look at the following report.
Initially, Camp David seemed to have ushered a new era. In September 1979, Egyptian President Sadat held an official visit to Haifa, his second overall trip to Israel. Such political climate encouraged many Israelis on their part to visit Egypt. Unfortunately, the friendly atmosphere between the nations quickly vanished. Mubarak, who came into office after Sadat, was criticized by many Egyptians for being a corrupt American and Israeli ally. Egypt and Israel maintained strictly formal relations which focused on security arrangements and occasional mediation efforts to ease the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Arab Spring marked a turn for the worse concerning the Egyptian-Israeli relations. In September 2011, Egyptians stormed the Israeli embassy in Cairo, and the Israeli diplomats were rescued only after President Obama personally interfered. Still, Egypt and Israel are not sworn enemies as before. A discreet dialogue between the two nations' military elites continues, as each side understands that without the groundbreaking Camp David Accords, things could have been much worse for all concerned.
We're also joined from across the border in Cairo by freelance journalist and Arabist Annabel Vanderberg. Annabel, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for being with us. Correct me if I'm wrong, but, you know, I'm assuming there is no celebration or special hour report today in Cairo about the 35th anniversary of the peace treaty. Is it marked in any way, shape, or form?
Well, at this moment, there is indeed no any celebration at all in Egypt. I think that is because people at this moment, because of the chaos in the country, they're basically looking at the national politics of the country rather than the international relations.
You know, obviously, as they should. But speaking of these peace accords, and you're based in Cairo, this is not something that the Egyptians, and I'm asking this a lot, you know, they are not looking at this as the big victory for Egypt, right? That's not the moment they mark when it comes to their relationship with Israel.
No, the big victory for them, of course, is in '67 when they
actually
when
73, the Yom Kippur War, I believe.
When they were winning basically territory on the Israelis. That's for them the biggest victory. But on the other hand, you can see that the majority of Egyptian people are now really supporting the army, and the army in his turn is supporting Israel and the peace accord. So you can see and you can feel that Egyptians themselves are also backing that at these days.
Now, interesting point, very much so. Do stay with us, Annabelle. Ambassador Levanon, you know, you were based in 2011 as the ambassador in Egypt. But, and I'm asking you, the criticism across the board of this being a cold peace, you know, that's something that we've heard many years through the 3 decades. It's a peace, but it's a cold peace. That seems to anger, you know, many people in Egypt of, you know, being expected to sort of kumbaya with the Israelis. What would you say to that?
Well, first of all, the fact is that it was and it still is a cold peace. But I think that the cold peace is much more preferable to any belligerency or any war. It is also correct to think that at the time when we have reached that accord and the agreement with the Egyptians in Israel, and I'm talking about the Israeli side, we were extremely excited. You know, it was something like divine, you know, something that we were expecting. But at the same time, we were expecting also to inject substance to that accord, which is the frame. And we wanted very much. We started at the beginning, and Sadat was extremely instrumental in that, but he had to face a lot of opposition. And when the tragedy is that he passed away quickly and too early.
For this thing with his life in many ways.
This is incorrect. He did not pay because of the peace treaty. He paid because he cracked down the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamists. It's completely not correct, but nevertheless.
Didn't they issue a fatwa at the time on him that citing also part of it was being the accord signed with Israel?
Yeah, but let's say that the main trigger was that he cracked down really massively all these people, but nevertheless, he disappeared from the scene, from the political scene too early.
Right.
And when we're talking about 35 years now, out of this 35, we have 30 with Hosni Mubarak. And Hosni Mubarak deliberately, to my understanding, wanted to lower the expectations from both sides. And this is why we have today a frame which exists, and to my understanding will exist even in the future. But inside the frame, we have no picture. We have quite nothing inside.
And Ali Waqid, senior Middle East analyst of I-24 News, it is this type of criticism that this is a cold peace, that it has no substance, that has surfaced for many, many, many years. But still, I mean, it's something that's holding for 35 years. Aren't we making light of it?
Well, I totally disagree when we say there is no substance. Maybe there is no political substance. There is no substance at the level of the exchange between both people. But when we see in the last couple of years the growing and the huge cooperation and collaboration between the two intelligence services in Israel and in Egypt, fighting the jihadist group in Sinai, especially I'm talking about the last month. We cannot talk about non-existence of substance. This is the substance that is right now. This was the substance in the last couple decades. We should pay attention to one thing. The peace agreement, one, it put an end to 4 wars between Israel and the Arab world. No more Arab-Israeli wars up after the peace agreement. This is one thing. The second thing, at the Egyptian level, it isolated Egypt from its Arabic environment. For many years, Egypt was boycotted by the Arab world. And in this, on this ground, we couldn't expect from the Egyptians to try to inject warmth and heat in the peace agreement with Israel, but we should not underestimate the fact that the state of belligerency between Israel and the Arab world, not only Israel and Egypt, disappeared with this peace agreement. And this is knowing the fact that the situation is still very tender in the region between Israel and the Arab world, between Israel, the fact that the Palestinian cause is not solved yet. We couldn't expect to injection of kind of culture, economy, etc. But at least we have this intelligence collaboration, this military collaboration that we shouldn't underestimate, and the sign that Egypt sent to the Arab world that peace should be, and the diplomatic track should be the main tool to discuss, to negotiate with Israel, and not the weapons.
And Annabellum joining us, Annabellum Vandenberg joining us from Cairo, still with us on the line. When, we can't take away from the fact or disregard the fact that over the course of the last 3 years, Egypt has been going through major transformation, Arab Spring, starting about 3 years ago. In 2011, when the Muslim Brotherhood afterwards took over, was there a concern that this treaty, or was there any kind of push to try and shy away from this treaty? Or do both sides of the Egyptian camp, because it seems to be like both sides in the Egyptian society right now, understand in their heart the importance of the strategic importance of this treaty? Or does it stand in danger now?
It does stand a little bit in danger, basically, and for example, on the border with Egypt and Israel, the situation is a lot more hostile because that area is ruled totally by Islamists at this point. And over the last years, the government has lost a little bit of control over that area. And as we have seen in the last couple of months, there have been several attacks because the Islamists, they don't agree with the ousting of President Mohamed Morsi last year in July. So you can see that this threat to Israel is becoming bigger and it's becoming more difficult. So I think on the one side, the Islamists, they don't agree with the peace accord. On the other hand, the government at this moment, backed by the army, they do see more than ever the importance of the peace accord to keep stability in the region, to keep stability in the country Egypt, and to have good relationships with Israel.
With Israel. Interesting. And Ambassador Lebanon, you were there 2011. I think you were even, chopper lifted out of that country during the big mess with the Israeli embassy. Looking at what you're seeing right now, you're also an Arabist, you know the region. What's happening in Egypt right now, many will argue that this peace treaty will never last without the Americans. That this has to have the Americans in play. The fact that in the Egyptian administration, the current, interim army-backed administration is gesturing to Russia, as was sort of the case between, the two big powers before the Yom Kippur War. Does that put it in danger as well? I mean, what's with all these gestures?
Yeah, I think that we faced at a certain moment a kind of a danger in the form that I'm talking about when the Muslim Brotherhood reached power.
Right.
Some people, including the Muslim Brotherhood, they have asked to put this peace treaty for a referendum in Egypt. That he would be endorsed by the people or not. And we didn't like it, at the time. But I think that Annabelle spoke about the popularity of the army today. And this is a crucial factor because the institution who supports the frame of the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt is the army, because the army do understand what is the alternative. The army is very practical and realistic because they do understand. Going back to the situation of belligerency of Israel do not serve the interest of Egypt, and definitely not at this moment. So in this regard, we see that the peace treaty on both sides, and I'm talking now on the Egyptian side, it is a genuine interest of the Egyptians, and this is why they are keeping this peace treaty. What I'm talking is about two different levels. We have the frame, the peace treaty, which I do not argue and is excellent. It is historical.
One thing that actually succeeded, yes.
He succeeded, and he even lost it. But I'm talking about another level, the level of the bilateral relations. If I will take the peace treaty today, and I will depict from this the different articles and annexes, for instance, trade, commerce, agriculture, or whatever, basically we have nothing on these bilateral relations. But we are happy that the framework is still existing, and it is a mutual interest, and you have to keep it as such.
And one can argue that, in 35 years is actually a very short time in Middle Eastern time. I think everything here takes a bit longer than anywhere else. Ali Waqid, really quick, do you think this thing is going to last, that this treaty is going to last?
It will last, and I want to comment on what Mr. Ambassador said. Even during the first period of Morsi in power, there were no plan to put into question the continuation of the peace agreement. The Egyptian government under Morsi didn't question the fact that this is part of the strategic agreements that the Egyptian government should respect. And even in the donation, we didn't hear slogans like cutting the diplomatic relations. At the maximum, we heard we should expel the Israeli ambassador and not cut the diplomatic relations with Israel. I think the peace agreement with Israel is part of the permanent components of any governmental plan, whether this is right or left, whether this is backed by the army or not backed by the army. The peace agreement is there. This is a demand of the international community, and Egypt is not in a situation to try to negotiate with the international community that support Egypt with many billions of dollars on the continuation or not continuation of the peace agreement.
But still on the ground, very quickly, today we do not have still an Egyptian ambassador in Israel. We do not have any embassy in Egypt. It's a fact.
It is a fact, and that's something that sadly has been going on for the last 3 years. But before
there is an Israeli flag in Cairo.
There's an Israeli flag. And that said, both Ambassador Lebanon and Ali Walker, thank you so much for being with us. As we said, it has been lasting, though in some frame of work, for 35 years. And thank you, Annabelle, from Cairo. We leave you, though, with the words of Kamila Sadat, the daughter of President Anwar Sadat, who sadly, as we said, was assassinated in Cairo approximately 30-some years ago, shortly after the treaty was signed. She had this to say in defense of the treaty and her father's work. And have a good day.
This is the history of the Middle East on one wall. That's what you did.
This is my history. This is my father when he was in the beginning of the revolution, when he was a baby. And this, the Time magazine took this, they called him the fourth pyramid of Egypt. And that's the last picture of the president with the vice president before he was assassinated. And look at this one, look at the smile here, and that was the same day. This is the life of the Israelis and the Egyptians today together in peace. Those are the people responsible for it. This agreement is what will stay forever, no matter what the Muslim Brotherhood tried. I'm telling you, I put my life for this. I put my life for this.
Thank you for joining us today, I-24 News Morning Edition. As we said, 35 years to the one lasting peace in this region. We leave you on that optimistic note. Do not forget to join us tomorrow for another morning edition to start your day. Thank you.